Hello, my name is Margaret Adele, and welcome to another indie book review. This is an author I have reviewed so much from 12 or 13 books at this point, I think. But today we are reviewing Mimic Arcanist by Shami Stovall. This is the sequel to Academy Arcanist, and this series in itself is a sequel to the Frith Chronicles by Shami Stovall, which is a YA Flintlock fantasy Pokemon, all about a world with these creatures called Eldrin that humans can bond with through trials of worth, and their trials of worth and the kind of magic and all that kind of stuff is specific to that creature. So it's a lot of fun to figure out, oh, what is this creature's magic like? What do you have to do to complete their trial of worth? It's a lot of fun, and I loved the original series. Frith Chronicles was one of my favorites. Now I'm going to do my best not to spoil anything from that series talking about this one. Some minor spoilers might happen. I'm going to try to avoid it, but there's certain things where it's even talking about the fact that, this person is a child of that person lets you know that that person from the original series had a kid with someone. I'm going to try to keep that to a minimum. I'm not going to be talking about a lot of the specifics of what happened in the God Arcanist's War from that series, but I do low-key think that you should read that one first before reading Astra Academy. That's just my opinion. But this one takes place 50 years after the end of that series, and this book itself takes place I think a couple weeks after the end of book one, and I am going to be directly talking about spoilers for that book. So I will have the review both for the first Frith Chronicles book and for the first Astra Academy book down in the description below. But let's jump into this one specifically. So, like I said, this one takes place a couple weeks after the end of book one, where Gray discovered that one of his professors was evil and trying to make a portal to the Abyssal Hells to bring back his Death Lord brother, and needed the souls of elder twins to do the thing, and Gray was supposed to be the last soul that he stole to make it work, but they stopped him. Yay! But now Gray has PTSD. Boo! He is still covered in scars, which is very strange for an Arcanist. Most of them heal very quickly, but because of the wounds he got, he's still bearing all the scars and very self-conscious about it. And in general, he's very paranoid. And it turns out that that paranoia might be slightly warranted, because on a fun camping trip for class stuff, he discovers that there are gate fragments from that portal out in the world, and they are low-key bringing little pieces of the Abyssal Hells into the world. Not an entire portal into it, but just enough that it's a real problem. And that is the big threat hanging over everything. And without going into too much detail, there's also an internal threat he has to begin facing, and I really liked that. We'll get to the ending later, but Shami Stovall is well known for her bombastic endings, and this one was no different. Now, as a whole, the plot of this one is kind of meandering slightly, because none of the characters have a set we must go do this thing like happened in a lot of the second half of the Frith Chronicles. This one definitely feels more meandering. They're just kind of going to school, and they're really concerned about this fancy noble cotillion coming up, and they're learning stuff. And to be fair, there was a lot of new magic stuff in here. There's a lot of talk about ores and tattoos that are made to be magical, and there's a lot of new concepts. People have very clearly been researching and, coming up with new ideas and trying out new things, and there's more knowledge on things. So there is still stuff to learn about the world. It doesn't just feel like you're retreading the same ground from the Frith Chronicles, and I like that concept. I like that it didn't just feel like, oh, we're going to do the same stuff. The world is moving forward technologically, it's moving forward magically. I believe it looks like it's moving forward socially. A lot of queerness seems to be a lot more accepted, and I love that. But there were some struggles that I had with this series, because while endings are very clearly one of Shami Stovall's strengths, one of her biggest weaknesses, I believe, is romances. I had such a problem with the freaking love pentagon that sprouted in the Frith Chronicles, and I was low-key hoping we were going to have that again, but there's just something about the vibe, the way Gray thinks about several different female characters in this book all reads like they're possible love interests. And there's very clearly meant to be one specific love interest, like very much one that he's like looking to impress and wants to impress her family. But like there's other ones that he thinks about in certain ways where I can't be sure. And because of some of the things that Shami Stovall has written in other books, I know a romance fake out is a complete possibility. And that's not even a direct like Frith Chronicles things. Remember, I've read a dozen books by this author. Romance fake out is 100% in her repertoire. So I can't be sure. I can't be sure if that's going to continue, but in general, like I don't feel it. I didn't really feel most of the romances from the Frith Chronicles aside from the queer ones, but that's also just me. Like I was so proud of myself for calling those queer romances back then. I called both of them. I was like super proud of myself. I don't see any queer romances immediately jumping out in this one, but I'm keeping an eye out. Phila? I don't know. I think she might have a vibe. Regardless, that was probably one of my biggest struggles with this one. And the second one was Gray himself is a very distinct character from Volk. And I mentioned this in the review for book one, that already that means I was going to like him less than Volk, because Volk is my favorite type of character. The overly naive, overly earnest, wants to change the world for the better type. And his whole arc in that one, which was kind of learning that the world wasn't the storybook that he grew up believing it was. He couldn't be a storybook hero, so he had to figure out how he could be a hero in the real world. Like, that was a beautiful arc. And in this one, I think the arc is supposed to be Gray learning to care about others? Question mark? He's a lot more selfish than Volk was, but Volk was also self-sacrificing to a fault. He is very deceptive. He doesn't seem to automatically care about helping people so the way that Volk did. However, people are still constantly seeking him out for help, and it's a little bit strange. It made sense with Volk because Volk very quickly earned a reputation where he will go out of his way to help people. Like, that was a very big character point for him, but Gray is very much not wanting to help people and not wanting anything to do with all of that kind of stuff. And any help he gives is like begrudging and only because his brother wants him to do it. Like, it's weird that everyone keeps constantly looking to him for help when he's been characterized as not being helpful. And the way the book kind of spins it is, well, he's very out of the box. He's an out of the box thinker. He became a mimic Arcanist. So he's meant to kind of think on his feet. But like, he's already kind of doing that, so I don't know if that's like necessarily I can't gauge the arc as well with Gray. And the world treats him a lot the same that it treated Volk, despite the fact that they are vastly different characters, aside from like, they were both born on poor islands. But like beyond that, like, Gray is a very distinct personality from Volk, yet everyone in the world tends to treat him very similarly to the way everyone treated Volk, and it doesn't make sense when Soren, his brother, is a lot more Volk-like than Gray is. And I love Soren. I love the little romance he gets. Like, he's my favorite. Like, I'm telling you now, like, the earnest characters who are also Nightmare Arcanists are apparently my favorite. Like, they're just apparently my all-time favorite. Random side note, I actually did see a picture of a cosplay of Luther from the original series, and it's great. But regardless, there was also a very big cameo from a major character of the previous series. Not just Adelgis. I mean, Adelgis is a standing cameo character in this series, but you also can see a little bit more of Fane this time. Fane gets a little bit more screen time, quote unquote, in this book than he did in the last one. And there was another big character that came in, and I was so excited, and then it kind of felt anticlimactic. Like, I don't know why he was in there just for that. Would have liked a little bit more. Regardless, we got to talk about the ending. Now, I have said this in every Shami Stovall book I have ever read. Girlfriend likes her a big ending. If there's not a giant monster or explosions, she doesn't want it. And I'm dead serious, okay? Literally every Shami Stovall book I have ever read, either giant monster or explosion and fire, depending on the genre. It's a staple of her work. And this one, again, we got a nice good giant ending. And it did feel a little bit like it came out of nowhere. I would have liked a little bit more ramping up in the tension before that just kind of went hello. But it was a nice dramatic ending. Although it wasn't the big part. It wasn't the big part that I was really into. It was the internal conflict. And I'm not gonna talk anything more about that, but there was a nice, juicy internal conflict that I loved. This series as a whole is ramping up a lot quicker than the original series did, because in the Frith Chronicles, it wasn't really until book 3 that the ending happened. You're like, oh, shit's going down. Like, it's here. In the original series, he had like, ending of books 1 and 2 was pretty big, but they were also like one-off battles. And then book 3, you're like, oh no, the world is entirely different now. But like this one, I mean, already the ending of book 1 is like up there. And then this one ups it even further and even bigger danger now. Like, it's intense and there's a lot of things going on. And I am excited to keep reading. I believe as I film this, the 3rd book, Abyssal Arcanist, has just come out. And I am sure, Shami, I know you watch these, will be sending me it eventually. And also, you mentioned in the note on this one, Margaret, I will probably have cool bookmarks soon. Cool bookmark with book 3, mayhaps. Regardless, I really liked this book. I gave it 4 stars. Admittedly, it kind of is because of the comparison to the original series. I can't not be comparing them in my head when it's literally a direct sequel and characters from that series are coming back, and I'm really, really hoping for specific characters to make a comeback too. I mean, he's a mimic Arcanist. Zelfrey has to come up sooner or later, right? I mean, I get why he can't come up right now. You don't want the up-and-coming acolyte to suddenly have all the answers of his exact Eldrin. He's got to figure out a little bit of his own, but like, you can't not bring back the original mimic Arcanist. Come on! Regardless, I am enjoying it. It definitely does pale in comparison. I think overall, from what I've read so far of this series, like, Frith Chronicles is still way in the lead. Still really far in the lead, but again, Volk was the character archetype that I love the most, and Gray is, if he has a good character arc, because I do like a good I don't care about anybody character learning to care about people, I could probably come to love him, but Volk still has my whole heart, whole heart. And I do still recommend this one, obviously, if you've liked the series so far. If you liked book 1, obviously, it is more of the goodness. Even if I'm partially reading just to see what other characters from the Frith Chronicles come back, I need evidence of queer marriages. Shami, you know who I want canonical evidence are married. I've been calling it since the first time the word moonbeam came up. I want a canonical marriage. Regardless, thank you so much for watching, and with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.